Sean Combs watches this, what do you think he's going to feel?
Like, wow, this is amazing. I think he's gonna say this is the best documentary I've seen in a long time.
How did you get that footage of Diddy?
I figured most journalists would not disclose their sources.
Does he know y'all have this in the doc?
I would doubt he knows.
That's a big fat note for me. I'm not interested in watching 50 Cent's documentary about Diddy. However, let me be clear from the jump that I am not avoiding this documentary because I'm in denial about Sean Combs, and I'm not ignorant of the facts. The Diddy case has been public, documented, dissected, litigated, and circulated for years, with headlines, lawsuits, and industry whispers that were loud enough to be common knowledge. Nothing that 50 presents in this documentary will shock me. I feel like nothing will be revelatory. So this isn't about what the documentary exposes. It's about who is positioned to benefit from the exposure. Two things can be true. Critics are not wrong when they say this documentary is better than expected. By all the reviews I've read, it says the documentary is thorough, grim, heavy, and structured more like a case file than a gossip reel. And yes, that matters. Survivors being believed matters. Patterns of abuse being documented matters. Power being challenged matters. But here's the line I refuse to cross. I do not believe accountability requires me to anoint a different abuser as credible. Accountability theater is still theater. This documentary exists inside capitalism, inside ego, inside branding. And when the executive producer is a man with a documented history of misogyny, harassment, and abusive behavior toward women, I am allowed to say no. In fact, I'm obligated to be skeptical because concern for women does not magically appear when it becomes profitable, and exposing another man's violence does not erase your own record. Justice is not transferable. And I know why this documentary didn't collapse into 50 Cent's revenge circus. And here's where I give credit where it's due. And this part is important. The documentary was directed by a woman, Alexandria Stapleton. That matters. It likely explains why the tone is more restrained than expected, why the story centers testimony over taunts, and why it resists becoming a pure ego battle. In many ways, she is the saving grace of the project. But a female director does not neutralize a male producer's power. It does not undo who funded it. It does not erase who benefits from its success. And the missing piece critics keep hinting at, in which even positive reviews note that's absent in the documentary, is there's no meaningful analysis from trauma experts. There's no psychological framework for the abuse. There's no serious interrogation of how misogyny and power replicate themselves across men like Diddy and the men critiquing him. So what we get is exposure, not transformation, visibility, not healing, and that's where my support ends. So no, 50 Cent cannot be the moral lens. Let's say this plainly. A man who has publicly mocked women's bodies, ridiculed victims of violence, trafficked in misogynoir as humor, humiliated former partners, and shown emotional cruelty even toward his own children, does not get to narrate accountability for abuse without scrutiny. That doesn't mean the documentary lies. It means that the messenger contaminates the message. One abuser exposing another is not justice. So yeah, I'm not interested in watching powerful men turn on each other and calling that progress. That is not a reckoning. That is reputation laundering. When abusers expose abusers, the system stays intact. It just rearranges the hierarchy. And women remain evidence. Women remain content. Women remain collateral. So again, no, I will not be watching this documentary, not because the documentary lacks merit, but because I refuse to participate in a framework where one man with a history of harming women is positioned as a credible arbiter of another man's crimes. You don't heal harm by recycling it in a different font. I care about victims too much to confuse exposure with justice, and I trust my discernment more than the hype. So that's my tea spilled, and my cup is down for now. So we're just shy of 400 subscribers right now, and I'm trying to push this community up to 500 strong before the month's out. So every click, every comment, every share, it feeds the algorithm gods. So stay tuned to sip more tea and keep sipping till the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye.
The restitution, resurrection, whatever the fuck it's called. I watched it. It is so thinly veiled in misogynoir And it's hard to catch it because it is a very well done documentary. It is very fact based. Diddy was like factually a terrible person. Like, it's not hard to find a bunch of terrible things about him. I'm not minimizing that. That was a well done and well put together piece of media. But the fact that the only reason that it's even in production and got out and all this and was so well done and had so much attention put into it is because 50 Cent has a vendetta against P. Diddy, and it actually genuinely has nothing to do with wanting people's stories to get out is crazy. And it has just like a sinister twinge to it. Like, just a sinister twinge. And the whole time I was watching, I just couldn't help but think, wow, this was made by 50 Cent, who is notably like a kind of a shitty nigga. I don't... And it's just so interesting. And it really does show that a lot of women's suffering is truly seen as a joke and not taken seriously, because I've never heard 50 Cent speak up about domestic violence or anything. Maybe he has and I just don't know. I've never heard him be vocal about these things. And so for the first time for him to be vocal is a place where he can profit, number one. And to be vocal about these things on behalf of and on the back of beefing with a nigga is crazy. And it's very equivalent to Kendrick Lamar calling out Drake for being and all these things, and then bringing Dr. Dre on stage, who, especially if you're from the West Coast, you know about this, who is notoriously physically aggressive towards women, like notoriously. And in defense of women, and like this whole thing of like fake, like, you're a weirdo towards girls and we gotta protect girls, he bought Dr. Dre on stage. It's very much not different. A lot of black men do not want like racial equality. They want the ability to commit atrocities at the same rates as white men and then be forgiven at the same rates as white men. And honestly, number one, that's just not how it goes. That's just a system, the same system that says a master key opens a bunch of locks and a shitty lock can be opened by a bunch of keys, says that you can't do the same shit that a cracker does. Like, that's the same system. So, you know, we gotta acknowledge that we live under these systems, right? But even in the way that 50 Cent like produced this documentary, it was very like, I don't want to say there were dog whistles, because not necessarily, but it was very small things that he chose to focus on that just made me realize that at the surface, he still was a man who had no respect for women, and black women especially. Capricorn Clark, the jurors that he chose to use, the two jurors that he chose to talk about, maybe they're the only ones that were willing, whatever. The way they were so quick, whether that was done with editing and the way they questioned them or what, the way they were so quick to denounce Capricorn Clark's credibility, and even Cassie's credibility, was very indicative of just misogynoir in our own people, because one of the jurors was a black woman in ourselves, and just like as a whole. And there were certain things that if you truly took what those, you know what, maybe I'm wrong, because I don't want to say I'm wrong, but you have to report all sides, right, to get an accurate answer. But I just think that certain sides would have been portrayed differently if 50 Cent was a person who truly had respect for the survivors and their stories and the trauma that they've truly been through. But the purpose of this documentary was to vilify Diddy, which, shout out to 50 Cent, by the way, because very important, very much needs to happen. Bitch, know me. Everybody's known Diddy is weird. I went to, in college, I went to college in LA. We've been here, I think I lived with, like, his son's girlfriend's best friend, like, in the same friend group or something. I don't even remember. Or, like, her cousin, her sister, or something. I don't remember. I remember we used to hear horror stories about how his son used to treat one of his girlfriends at the time. That was 10 years ago. I pay attention to shit. The rap songs, Biggie lyrics. If you know me, you know. You been new. If you know me, you know you been new about all this Diddy shit. But that's neither here nor there. Moral of the story is, shout out to that documentary, because those people's stories needed to be told, and in a lot of ways it was, I don't want to say it was unbiased, but it was well researched, and those people's stories got out accurately as they needed to. But for me, it was very easy to tell that it was made under the guise of a nigga that still kind of might not believe women all the time. You know what I mean?